And welcome back to what is going to be the final Crash Team Racing developer time video. Well, this is it. We've taken on just about everyone except the infamous William P, which is exactly what we're going to do today, facing him on the tracks that remain. Crash Cove, Slide Coliseum, Turbotrack, Dragon Mines, Blizzard Bluff, Hot Air Skyway, Cortex Castle, Out of Time, and Megamix Mania. I've heard countless stories about how difficult his times were, and you know what? They do not kid around. This man is an absolute beast. These times were perhaps some of the hardest I've ever had to tackle. But you know what? I'm so glad I took him on, so that everything is out of the way, and I hope to never have to try this hard ever again. And to finish this off right, we're going to bring in some of my top mains to face against William, including Spyro the Dragon, Coco Bandicoot, and Panda Penguin, if not just to give him some long overdue time in the spotlight. Anyway, let's go. First up is Crash Cove, aka one of the most deceivingly difficult tracks to get the best possible time on. This took me about 52 attempts, but my god, the time William P got here is actually very close to being a world record time. You'd have to have the exact skill level of a speedrunner in order to make it through this one unscathed. Know when to U-turn around that beginning corner, hug the walls as much as possible. This was without a doubt one of the hardest times I've ever had to beat, and I'm fairly sure I'm not alone on that sentiment. To everyone else who's beaten these times, I share your sympathy. Up next, Slide Coliseum, with a lengthy 45 attempts. This and Turbotrack were perhaps some of the most aggravating, if not annoying, tracks to play through in a time trial scenario, if not for two completely different reasons. In the case of Slide Coliseum, you have no turbo pads, nothing to give you that special advantage. Everything boils down to you knowing how to keep your reserves as much as possible. Combine that with grass hopping and knowing how to U-turn and make your way across those tires, and already I was in for a pretty bad time. One redeeming factor is that around lap 3, William slips up while jumping through the tires, so this whole time I played through this time trial can be summed up as playing follow the leader until he slips up at the very end. And once I've gotten this out of the way, I could safely move on to the next one. You know, it's amazing how it took until playing this time trial to change your exact perspective on this track. I used to like playing Slide Coliseum, I didn't mind it so much, and then this happened. Boy, what was I thinking? And then there's Turbotrack, perhaps the track I ended up saving for last in terms of time trial, clocking it at 78 attempts. You know, I think I have the perfect clip to sum up my exact thoughts. Lewis, if you please. Just replace Dragon Mines with Turbotrack and you'll have exactly how I felt. Honestly, with this track there's just too much to take into account. Reserve management, cutting corners, grass hopping, U-turning, grass hopping while U-turning. Needless to say, this one was chaotic. Though in hindsight, I can't say I didn't see it coming. This is a track everyone seems to struggle with, and I'm beginning to see why. Fortunately, William P slips up right at the very end of the track, so all I really had to do was get close enough to clutch the win, and eventually I managed to pull through. Honestly, if I ever have to play a track like this hard ever again, on top of Slide Coliseum, it'll be way too soon, I tell ya.
dragging your feet.
Dragon Mines, hoo boy. This may have taken 12 attempts. 12 single attempts to get through this one unscathed. But that's not to say this wasn't one of the most nerve-wracking tracks to play on. First off, I had to learn how to take that minecart shortcut, which up to here I have never considered doing. On top of that, the one thing that really hurts this track is considering when exactly you're supposed to expect the minecarts, as they will inevitably smush you flat if you aren't careful. So while there were times where I felt like running towards the nearest living thing and killing it, that was quickly followed up with a sense of relief once I got just close enough to beat his time by this much. Blizzard Bluff at 20 attempts. I was honestly really glad I took this on against William P first. This wasn't really as bad as I thought it would be. The only real worrying factor was learning how to jump over the fence. perhaps one of the hardest shortcuts to tackle. But you know, if I were given the choice between this or Nina's Nightmare when it came to fence hopping, I would gladly take this any day. But that's beside the point. After practicing a couple rounds, I knew without a doubt I could take this fence hop. The only real worrying factor was the snow slowing me down, so positioning is very important. So once I learned how to do so, what we got was another solid win in the end. Next is Hot Air Skyway at 28 attempts. How is it this track has some of the hardest challenges ever? I mean, first there was Ring Rally, and then there's this. The one thing that nearly drove me insane on this track is the corkscrew at the very beginning. I've never even thought of U-turning around that spiral before, and once I started doing so, I had to make sure I keep my fire consistently at all times. Much less with the drift engine. It's tracks like this and Dragon Mines where I realize how much of a loose cannon I am with this driving style. Yeah, it's helped me out on a handful of tracks, including the infamous Drive Through Danger, but at this point, yeah, it's overstayed its welcome for me. Getting back on point, this was another toughie that I was just so glad to get out of the way once everything was done. Cortex Castle at 37 attempts. Unlike Hot Air Hellway, this was a track I actually wanted to beat. Could be contributed to the fact that I've played this long enough to feel just comfortable playing through. I can make it through those sharp corners no problem, but my real worrying factor was keeping my blue fire on laps 2 and 3. Eventually I had to learn one little trick regarding this map, something I'd like to call the double dip mechanic. Basically, once you get to the blue fire ramp, what you want to do is jump just as you touch the ramp, then hop again just before you jump right off. This really came in handy keeping my reserves intact, and I'll be sure to jog it into my brain to try this every once in a while. This helped really make this time trial all the more worth it, and I was completely satisfied with my run regardless.
Whoa! Supercharged! Stop dragging your feet.
Out of time. What can I really say about this one? At 77 attempts, this is one of the tracks that really kept me for the longest time, next to Turbotrack and Tiny Temple. Honestly, the hardest part about this track was keeping my reserves at all times, which in the case of William OP over here, that's a guaranteed must if you're gonna beat this time. I feel like I've tried practically everything to hold on to my fire. Eventually, I picked up on some tricks from people like the Viperian to help me make it through. Also had the U-turn inside the clock, had to learn how to make that one jump from the left side as opposed to the right. Eventually, this led to a victory by 2 seconds. And I can honestly live with that. I'll take that for what it's worth. And ending this craziness is Megamix Mania at a not too shabby 12 attempts. The real hard part about this time was actually cutting through the sand near the beginning. Right as you make that first shortcut, all you had to do was hop and U-turn a couple times, avoid that one paint mine, and repeat this till the very end. Already I had a gut feeling I was doing something right, as William always takes the middle curve near the very end as opposed to the left or right ramps, which is something I've always been doing for the longest anytime I play this track. So as long as I did that and learned the whole sand hopping thing, this ended up being another satisfying time to beat. Another worthwhile run, all things considered.
Stop dragging your feet.
This was recorded right after facing Turbotrack, which was my last time trial to beat. But after doing all that, it's time we check out our reward. And here they are, the Master Wheels. All that hard work for these beauties. Honestly, I'd say it was worth all the hard work. These time trials were some of the hardest I've ever had to face. And heck, with people like William P on board, you know you've got dedicated people playing these times. Them devs at Beenox don't mess around. But you know what? In the end, I'm actually glad I took them on. This really helped me improve my skills as a player. I wouldn't call myself the greatest or anything. Like, I played this long enough to know some of the technical stuff like U-turning, as well as cutting corners wherever I can. But this really helped to amplify my skills up to 11. And while I may not be doing this all the time consistently, I am going to be putting some of my newfound strategies to the test wherever I can. So to end this video off, let's showcase the new Master Wheels while playing on Spyro Circuit to showcase what I've learned from Matthew R. Thank you all for sticking with me through the end. I'm gonna let this footage play till the very end. See you all in the next video. Take care.
Last one there's a Nork. dragging your feet.